You know nothing, Giwu said urgently. Let me seal the power within these bamboo trees so you can unearth them. Trust me, they will be of immense use. With that, he drifted out from the soul-locking box and exhaled a mass of gray mist that rolled over the entire bamboo grove. The mist seeped into the stalks and ghostly gray patterns bloomed across their surfaces. Seeing this, Hanli did not hesitate. He swept both sleeves outward, and two arcs of crescent-shaped golden light burst from his palms. The earth was torn open, bamboo and soil alike ripped free, then swept cleanly into his flower branch domain. My apologies, Hanli said calmly to Shi Chuangkong and the others. These bamboo trees are valuable to me, so I took a short detour. No harm done, Shi Chuangkong replied with a casual wave. And who might this be? This is fellow Taoist Gi Wu, Hanli said evenly. A soul fragment I encountered and rescued earlier in the underworld. He deliberately withheld further details. I see. A pleasure, Shi Chuangkong said, clasping his fists in greeting. Guiwu glanced at him, gave a brief nod, and returned to the soul-locking box. The group then resumed their journey. With Han Li and Weeping Soul leading the way, their passage through the 100-ghost forest was smooth and uneventful. After more than a month, they finally emerged onto a vast gray plain, stretching endlessly ahead. How far are we from the Yellow Springs? Han Li asked. We're already there, Giwu replied. That red region ahead, that's the Yellow Springs. Sure enough, a haze of crimson vapor lay heavy on the distant horizon. Han Li immediately moved forward, the others following close behind. The air carried a suffocating stench, and with every step toward the red haze, the feeling of asphyxiation grew stronger. Soon, an enormous lake came into view, vast as an inland sea. Its surface near the shore was smooth as polished glass, utterly still. Above the lake's center, dense crimson clouds pressed low, merging with the chaotic red vapor rising from below to form a region where sight itself was smothered. To the north, the sky appeared torn apart, and from the gash poured a crimson waterfall, a ribbon of blood descending from the heavens. Though it seemed to crash down with boundless force, it touched the lake as lightly as drifting feathers, a sight both eerie and unreal. Along the lakeshore stood towering dark red stone forts, each over 1,000 feet tall, banners bearing strange tribal totems hanging from their walls. This is where the 4 major tribes once stationed themselves, Giwu said. Hanli swept his spiritual sense across the forts. After a moment, he said, They're empty. You believe me now? Giwu asked. The absence of those tribes spares us much trouble, Hanli replied. Where is the 6 Paths reincarnation plate? Giwu rose like smoke from Hanli's pouch and pointed toward the lake's center. There. Hanli's expression darkened. You told me it was on the shore. Why is it in the middle? I feared you wouldn't dare come if I told you the truth, Giwu admitted sheepishly. Hanli said nothing at first. He knew little of the Yellow Springs, but even had he known its dangers, retreat was never an option. So the Yellow Springs are perilous? He asked. Giwu explained. The lake bed is riddled with soul-devouring springs. Once a living soul is drawn in, it is cast into reincarnation while the body rots and becomes part of the lake. Then we fly across? Jintong said at once. As long as you don't touch the water, that works, Guiwu replied. But the true danger lies above, in the crimson clouds. What danger? Shi Chuangkong asked. The clouds themselves are harmless. The wind within them is not. Spit it out, Jintong snapped. Guiwu continued. Those winds are 6 Paths gale winds. They're subtle and weak to the eye, yet they blanket the entire lake. Anyone caught within will have their flesh stripped away in moments, even great encompassment cultivators. Worse still, the gale will hurl you into the water, and your soul will be forced into reincarnation. Weeping Soul frowned. What if we cross by boat? That won't work, Giwu warned. This water cannot support even a feather. To test this, Jintong produced a handful of white fur plucked from Xiaobai at some unknown time and blew it onto the lake. The strands floated briefly, then sank without a trace. Hanli's brows knit together, then his eyes lit up. With a sweep of his sleeve, the bamboo trees reappeared. You had me collect this bamboo because it can cross the lake, didn't you? Exactly, Giwu said eagerly. Forgetful bamboo is the only thing that can float here. We must craft a boat from it. Hanli tossed a bamboo stalk onto the lake. It landed soundlessly, bobbed once, then floated steadily atop the surface. Good, Hanli said. Now, how do we deal with the Six Paths Gale? Within the gale lies a hidden channel, Guiwu said. I discovered it after hundreds of thousands of years. Guide the boat through it, and we can reach the center safely. Hanli produced a jade slip and tossed it over. Map the gale winds, mark the channel. Giwu accepted it with an awkward smile and closed his eyes to comply. The others began arranging the forgetful bamboo to build the boats. The channel won't be wide, and the bamboo is limited, Hanli said. We'll craft 2 small boats, 1 person each. I'll take one. You'll all remain within my domain treasure. The second boat will serve as backup. As always, fellow Taoist Han plans flawlessly, Shi Chuangkong said with admiration. Jin Tong and Weeping Soul exchanged proud smiles, while Violet Spirit watched Han Li with quiet warmth. Before long, 2 slender bamboo boats, each 30 feet long and 6 feet wide, were completed, and the map of the Six Paths Gale Winds lay ready. Giwu spoke weakly, explaining that the Yellow Springs Lake was boundless beyond measure, and the map he had formed with soul power could only cover several hundred kilometers around their current position. His voice faltered, the strain on his soul evident. Weeping Soul immediately extended her hand, crimson light wrapping around the soul locking box, and only then did Giwu's condition recover slightly. He offered her sincere thanks before falling silent. Han Li studied the jade slip briefly, then raised his gaze and activated his infernal devilish eyes. To ordinary sight, the Six Paths Gale Winds were formless and unseen, but before Han Li they revealed themselves clearly. Near the shore, the winds were faint and scattered, difficult even for him to trace. Toward the heart of the lake, however, they grew violent and distinct, surging with terrifying force, especially beneath the looming crimson clouds overhead. Just as Guiwu had said, the wind's distribution was utterly chaotic, without any discernible pattern. No channel could be seen. Han Li frowned slightly and remarked that the scene before them differed from what the map depicted. Guiwu explained that the Six Paths Gale Winds were in constant flux, and the map only reflected the moment when the hidden channel emerged. When the winds aligned with that state once more, the passage would naturally appear. How long must we wait? Han Li asked. Judging by the crimson clouds above the lake's center, Giwu estimated that it would not take long. Perhaps a month if fortune favored them, but certainly no more than a year. Han Li nodded and made his decision. The group settled temporarily within one of the stone forts by the lake, waiting as time slipped quietly past. More than half a year vanished like a dream. On that day, the Six Paths Gale Winds raged more fiercely than ever. The massive gusts that once lingered only at the lake's center had spread across nearly the entire surface, stopping just dozens of kilometers from the shore. This is the moment. We must move now, Guiwu cried, his voice sharp with urgency and joy. Shi Chuangkong and the others stared at him in disbelief. The conditions were worse than ever. How could this be the right time? Guiwu insisted that it was precisely because the smaller winds had merged into larger ones, leaving gaps between them, that the hidden channel could finally manifest. Han Li examined the lake once more with his infernal devilish eyes. Sure enough, the winds now matched Giwu's map exactly. I can see it, Han Li said calmly. The channel has appeared. Guiwu urged them to hurry, warning that these conditions would last only a few hours at most. Han Li swiftly made arrangements. Weeping Soul and Giwu would cross the lake with him by boat, while the others would remain within his domain treasure until they reached the destination. No one objected. With a sweep of his sleeve, Han Li summoned a door of silver light, and one by one, the group entered the Flower Branch domain. Violet Spirit lingered at the end, glancing back at Han Li with quiet concern and reminding him to be careful. Han Li smiled, nodded reassuringly, and sealed the silver door. Turning to Weeping Soul, he said it was time to depart. Through voice transmission, he instructed her to watch both their surroundings and Guiwu closely. If Guiwu showed the slightest sign of betrayal, she was to strike without hesitation. Han Li's tone was calm and confident. Having reached the pinnacle of mid-great encompassment, he feared little. Weeping Soul accepted without question. Han Li summoned one of the bamboo boats they had prepared earlier. When it touched the lake's surface, it bobbed gently before stabilizing. The two leapt aboard with practiced ease. Han Li reminded Giwu to give timely warnings along the way. Giwu emerged from the soul-locking box with a smile. declaring that they now shared the same fate, bound together both figuratively and literally. With a nod, Hanli conjured a fierce wind. The bamboo boat shot forward like an arrow, skimming the lake's surface as though no resistance existed at all. It sped straight toward a cluster of six paths gale winds, forcing Hanli to act at once. He summoned a bamboo pole and plunged it into the water, forcibly twisting the boat's course so it narrowly grazed past the deadly winds. Giwu shouted a warning as Hanli slowed the boat. Slipping through a narrow gap between two gales, they finally entered the hidden channel. At first, the passage was smooth. Soon, however, the winds grew ever stronger, and controlling the boat became increasingly difficult. Han Li devoted himself entirely to steering, relying on Giwu to guide the way. After veering past a massive cluster of winds, they were suddenly confronted by a towering wall of crimson clouds blocking the path. Han Li drove the bamboo pole straight down, halting the boat instantly. Giwu stared in disbelief. According to his knowledge, there should have been a way through. Weeping Soul stood behind him, her killing intent faint but ready. Yet Hanli could tell Guiwu was genuinely shocked, not pretending. As Hanli pondered the anomaly, his infernal devilish eyes caught something subtle within the clouds. He declared that the channel still existed. It was merely concealed. Guiwu looked closely and realized the cloud wall's base was thinner than the rest. After a brief pause, Hanli guided the boat forward. It plunged directly into the crimson clouds. Vision vanished, breathing grew labored. Yet in the blink of an eye, the boat burst through to the other side. Giwu's joy was unmistakable. Hanli surveyed their surroundings. The channel now ran between two towering walls of crimson clouds dragged down from the heavens by the six paths gale winds, forming a passage like a canyon between sheer cliffs. Every movement demanded caution. Guiwu finally relaxed, explaining that they had entered what he called the safe passage channel, where much of the journey ahead would be smoother. When Han Li asked about the name, Guiwu admitted it was chosen on a whim, more for luck than reason. Elsewhere, at the very center of the Yellow Springs, lay a vast and isolated region encircled by an unbroken ring of dense crimson clouds. Within this sealed area, all was calm. No six paths gale winds stirred. At its heart rested an island shaped like a wagon wheel. 6 mountain ridges extended inward from different directions, converging toward the center like spokes. Though barren of vegetation, the island was far from desolate. Stone stairways, simple pavilions, and ancient structures dotted the landscape. At the island's center rose a majestic stone palace built from enormous gray blocks. Around it stretched flat plazas of varying shapes and sizes, each patrolled by silent, ghostly guards, as though awaiting the arrival of intruders long foretold. Before the palace gates stood a sea of ghostly guards, ranks upon ranks without end. At their head loomed 2 terrifying ghostly generals, their presences as heavy as iron mountains pressing upon the void. One bore a human frame crowned with a massive sinister ox's head. Black metal armor clung to his body, cold and oppressive, and in his hands he gripped a long iron staff, its shaft split cleanly into crimson and azure halves, radiating baleful chill. His companion was no less fearsome, human-bodied yet cursed with a long, grotesque horse's face. Scarlet armor gleamed upon him, and he wielded a crystalline red chain and a ghostly claw stained with flecks of dried blood, as if torn straight from the underworld itself. The 2 stood utterly motionless before the sealed gates, like deathly statues guarding a forbidden realm. No plaque named the palace, and its doors were shut tight, sealing all secrets within. Deep beneath the palace lay a vast subterranean chamber, illuminated by countless blazing braziers. At its heart stood a colossal hexagonal stone platform, over 10,000 feet wide and only a few feet tall. Its surface shone smooth as polished jade. At the center rested a hexagonal pond filled with dark red liquid, thick and ominous. Suspended above the pond hovered a sphere of crimson light, within which floated a massive hexagonal plate engraved with countless intricate patterns. Strange fluctuations pulsed from it, its aura resonating faintly with heaven and earth, as though bound to the very laws of the world. At the pond's edge stood a tall man in black robes, his face hidden beneath a veiled bamboo hat. His aura was fully restrained, yet his presence towered over all else, even surpassing the might of the hexagonal plate itself. His head was slightly bowed, As if lost in deep contemplation, footsteps echoed through the chamber. Two women approached the platform, Worm 3 and the woman known within the reincarnation palace as Rushuang. Rushuang's appearance and bearing were identical to Nangongwan, for she was Nangongwan herself. Worm 3 gently held Rushuang's arm. Her own palm burned with feverish warmth, while Rushuang's skin felt faintly cold, the contrast sending ripples of confusion through Worm 3's heart. Since learning that Rushuang was her mother, her thoughts had been in turmoil. She stole glances at her again and again, unable to reconcile the truth. Rushuang, however, walked calmly onward, seemingly unaware. Palace Master, Worm 3 greeted with a respectful curtsy at the pond's edge. Rushuang followed suit. You may enter now, the reincarnation palace master said, turning toward them. Worm 3 clasped Rushuang's hand and guided her forward. Rushuang hesitated, glancing back, but Worm 3 answered with a gentle, encouraging smile. Lifting her dress, Rushuang descended the stone steps into the pond. The water rose only to her chest at the center. Just as she reached the middle and began to turn back, her body suddenly slackened. She fell unconscious and floated on her back upon the surface. Worm 3 was not surprised, as if she had already known this would happen. Why did you ask me to bring my mother here? She asked, brows knit. And why does she not remember me? She has already passed through reincarnation, the palace master replied evenly. Naturally, she remembers nothing of you. Worm 3's heart clenched. The man continued, explaining that Rushuang had been Gan Rushuang in her previous life and was now Nangong Wan. To remember her daughter, those memories would have to be restored. Gan Rushuang, Worm 3 murmured, questions flooding her mind. In the end, she asked only one. Why don't I remember my mother either? She died on the day you were born, came the answer. You saw her only once. Color drained from Worm 3's face. Was it because of me? No. She tried to speak again, but the palace master's voice turned sharp. Enough questions, Juzhen. Wait until her memories return. Worm 3 fell silent. The palace master formed a hand seal and began chanting. His robes billowed without wind as dark red law power surged forth. He pointed upward, sending a pillar of crimson light into the hexagonal plate. It began to spin, faster and faster, crimson radiance swirling like a vortex. A beam descended, bathing Nangongwan's body. Her brows twitched, her eyes rolling wildly beneath closed lids as if trapped in a chaotic dream. Moments later, she stilled, her body sinking slowly to the pond's depths. In the Yellow Springs, Han Li's group emerged from the canyon of crimson clouds. Giwu indicated that they were nearing the lake's center, and their journey had been smooth, proof that the chosen route was safe. After some time, their boat entered a vast, calm zone, free of crimson clouds and six-paths gale winds. Giwu cried out in alarm, warning that such calm suggested a deviation in the route. If the channel ahead was blocked, escape would be impossible. As he spoke, the wall of crimson clouds opposite them began to advance. A colossal shadow loomed behind it, drawing Weeping Soul's startled gaze. A gigantic black beast, resembling a snapping turtle, emerged, its four massive flippers churning black whirlwinds to keep it aloft. Even the six-paths gale winds could not hinder it. Giwu gasped in disbelief. Floating underworld turtles were said to have vanished hundreds of thousands of years ago. There are people on its back, Han Li said. Indeed, 7 or 8 figures stood atop the beast. At their head was a white skeleton in gray robes, with Shui Li standing behind it. Yin Luo and other familiar figures followed. Their gazes met. Killing intent flashed in Shui Li's eyes as he leapt into the air, raising his axe high and bringing it crashing down toward Han Li. Shui Li, stop! Giwu roared, but his warning arrived too late. A colossal crimson axe shadow, tens of thousands of feet long, descended from the heavens with tyrannical might, ripping open vast spatial fissures as it cleaved straight toward Han Li. The heavens seemed to split beneath its edge. Han Li did not even lift his eyes. With a casual sweep of his sleeve, a radiant golden palm manifested before him, calm and unhurried. His gaze never left the white skeleton upon the giant turtle's back, the only presence whose aura he could not fully discern. The golden palm was scarcely 10 feet across, pitifully small before the mountain-like axe shadow. Yet the moment they collided, the crimson axe shattered as if struck by divine judgment. The golden palm remained pristine, continuing its ascent until it vanished into the distant firmament as a speck of light. Shock froze Shui Li in place as he stared skyward. The white skeleton also glanced in that direction before turning its hollow gaze toward Han Li. Shui Li, are you blind? Can't you see that the Infernal King and I are here? Giwu shouted furiously. Giwu, you're still alive? Shui Li exclaimed in disbelief. Ignoring him, Giwu clasped his fists and bowed deeply toward the white skeleton. Junior Giwu greets Senior Bone Emperor. Bone Emperor inclined his head slightly. Why are you traveling with cultivators of the true Immortal Realm? His voice echoed as if layered with countless souls, drifting from nowhere and everywhere at once. We pursue the Reincarnation King, Giwu replied quickly. I presume Senior shares this goal. If so, please allow us to accompany you. Han Li frowned inwardly. He had never agreed to hunt the Reincarnation King. His purpose was the Six Paths reincarnation plate alone, yet before a figure revered by Giwu and Shui Li alike, he dared not speak rashly. In that case, old grudges can be set aside, Shui Li said. Senior Bone Emperor? It matters little, Bone Emperor answered indifferently, as if none present were worth notice. Through voice transmission, Han Li spoke coldly. This was not part of our agreement, fellow Taoist Giwu. The reincarnation plate rests with the Reincarnation King, Giwu urged. Confrontation is unavoidable. Defeat him and the plate is yours? I guarantee it. Han Li hesitated. He wished no part in underworld feuds, especially among forces he scarcely understood. Yet Giwu pressed on, warning that Bone Emperor was a Tao ancestor who would not tolerate dissent. With such a figure present, opposing the Reincarnation King would be effortless. We should avoid provoking him, Master, Weeping Soul advised softly. After a moment's silence, Han Li nodded. Giwu's delight was unmistakable. They stowed the bamboo boat and boarded the giant turtle, riding it toward the lake's center. Soon the island came into view, its perimeter sealed by a wall of swirling crimson clouds. Allow me, said a dark-skinned cultivator as he stepped forward. Aside from Shui Li, Bone Emperor's entourage numbered 6, all at great encompassment, with this man standing at the pinnacle of mid-stage. With Bone Emperor's tacit consent, the man formed seals. A massive, two-headed, four-armed, ghostly projection arose behind him, solidifying into a black-armored fiend radiating fearsome power. It roared to the heavens, unleashing a storm of black light that forced back the Six Paths gale winds. Violet Spirit nearly lost her footing, steadied only by Han Li's grasp. The storm struck the crimson barrier, raising faint ripples, and nothing more. Before shock faded from the dark-skinned man's face, a dozen crimson lightning bolts erupted from the clouds. They pierced the armored fiend effortlessly, reducing it to black smoke. The cultivator staggered back, vomiting blood as he collapsed to one knee. Trash, Bone Emperor snorted. This barrier is shaped by Six Paths gale winds through the reincarnation plate, Bone Emperor said, raising a hand. A titanic bone claw tore through the crimson clouds like paper, opening a vast breach. Praise rang out from Shui Li and Giwu alike, while Han Li watched with wary eyes. Only now did he truly grasp the terror of a Tao ancestor, each gesture harmonized with heaven and earth, an authority no great encompassment cultivator could defy. At Bone Emperor's command, the turtle passed through the breach. Who dares intrude? Ghostly guards surged forward as alarms echoed across the island. Shui Li charged first, axe flashing as dozens of guards were cleaved apart. Bone Emperor's followers joined the fray, and Han Li and Weeping Soul followed suit. Though none of the guards were great encompassment, their numbers and high zenith ranks made them formidable. Bone Emperor scowled. Enough. White radiance burst from his body, sweeping the island. Wherever it passed, ghostly bodies ruptured as skeletons tore free and exploded. Thunderous detonations echoed, limbs scattering like debris. In moments, nearly all defenders were annihilated. Only those near the Grey Palace survived, shielded by a hemispherical dark red barrier. At its entrance, 2 statue-like ghostly generals stirred at last, commanding the remaining guards to hold the line while messengers rushed inside to sound the alarm. Within the Middle-earth immortal region lay a peculiar land known as the Heavenly Prayer Continent. Unlike other immortal domains where cultivators devoted themselves to cultivation, pill refinement, or treasure forging, the people here revered only one art, divination. From reading the heavens and calculating fate, they discerned the destinies of others, foretelling the trajectory of one's great Tao and the ultimate heights one might reach. In the mortal world, Such arts were used to uncover those bearing kingly fate, nurturing them into founders of empires in exchange for immeasurable worldly returns. Among cultivators, divination served an even greater purpose, identifying seedlings of immortal destiny. Masters of this craft could peer into the future of children not yet on the path, determining how far they might one day tread upon the immortal road. With such abilities, they scouted prodigies for great sects and earned lavish rewards. The prosperity of the heavenly prayer continent stemmed largely from a single dominant force, the Heavenmen sect. This ancient sect ruled half the continent, its lineage stretching back beyond memory, its disciples countless. It was said that nearly all divination techniques under heaven trace their roots to this sect. Beyond this, Heavenmen possessed a forbidden art, refining quintessential divine rocks into clairvoyant artifacts. Foremost among them was the chaotic myriad spirit roll, famed for foretelling the birth of profound heavenly treasures. Long before the profound heavenly spirit/sword appeared in the spirit realm, the roll had already revealed its coming and the land of its emergence. Because of such fearsome insight, Heavenmen disciples often concealed their identities when traveling, even posing as members of lesser sects to avoid being coerced into divination. The sect resided in the eastern reaches of the continent, spanning the Resting Dragon, Heavenly Cycle, and 108 mountain ranges. Of these, Resting Dragon was its foundation. Rising Dragon Peak, the sect's origin, had long been sealed as forbidden ground, accessible only to the sect master and a few grand elders. Nearby stood Heavenly Inquiry Peak, where core disciples cultivated amid countless observation altars gazing into the firmament. At this moment, several disciples stood upon one such altar behind an imposing elder. Among them, a demonic cultivator with a goat's head stepped forward and saluted. Elder Fu Feng, we are about to depart for training in the immortal regions. Do you have any guidance? When you arrive, you will likely be stationed at ascension platforms. Fu Feng replied evenly, do not underestimate any who ascend. None reach the immortal realms without extraordinary traits. The disciples acknowledged him in unison. Fu Feng continued, his tone turning solemn. As for cultivators who ascend from the lost realms, do not divine them lightly. If you can form goodwill, do so. If not, sever all karmic ties completely. Though puzzled, the disciples obeyed without question and soon departed. Left alone, Fu Feng gazed into the distance, nostalgia flickering in his eyes. How high has he climbed now? He murmured. Long ago, while stationed at an ascension platform in the northern glacial immortal region under the alias Gao Sheng of Stone Ditch Palace, he had encountered an ascended cultivator from a lost realm. Curiosity drove him to divine that man's fate. Even fragmented visions were enough to exact a terrible price. His youthful form withered into that of an old man, beyond the reach of any rejuvenation art. When calamity later struck that ascended cultivator, Fu Feng feigned death and fled, severing karmic threads before returning to Heavenmend. Since then, he had never left the Middle-earth immortal region, nor spoken of the matter. The weight of that divination still haunted him. Just then, his expression shifted. Above Rising Dragon Peak, a vast vortex of clouds descended from the heavens. Strangely, the mountain's protective array did not stir, nor did the Grand Elder at its base raise alarm. Fu Feng frowned, yet knew better than to pry. Mist shrouded the summit of Rising Dragon Peak, within which bloomed a forest of peach trees. At its heart stood a black octagonal stone altar etched with the 8 trigrams. At its center churned a dark vortex radiating boundless suction. Within it was an elderly man, his body nearly consumed. Only his head, neck, and one arm remained. His white hair was wild, one eye blind and pale, his face mottled with dark stains, hideous beyond words. His remaining eye was half-lidded, exhaustion clinging to him like death itself. A cloud vortex settled beside the altar, and from it emerged a tall, fair-skinned man with slender eyes and calm bearing. He wore white robes bound with a golden belt from which hung a 9-dragon jade pendant. Yet he sat upon a white jade wheelchair. The old man's eye flew open, golden light bursting forth. You've finally come. I have, the man replied calmly. You were always destined to, the old man chuckled bitterly. What do you seek this time? I require your divination, Chen Tuan. The man trapped within the vortex was none other than Patriarch Chen Tuan, founder of the Heavenmen sect. the legendary clairvoyance Tao ancestor of the heavenly court. I owed you 36 heavenly and 72 earthly divinations, Chen Tuan said. You have used 106. 2 heavenly divinations remain, but I can perform only one more. I wish you to divine the reincarnation palace master once again, the man said. If he endures, he will remain a dagger at our backs. The laws of reincarnation cloak him, Chen Tuan replied. My divinations no longer reach him. 72 attempts have already failed. Are you certain? I am. Chen Tuan formed a seal and chanted. Golden light burst from his lone eye, warping space into a dark vortex that linked with the one devouring him. Minutes passed before the light faded. Black translucent threads then emerged, coiling around his remaining arm and dragging it into oblivion. How was it? The man asked. He remains untraceable, Chen Tuan said calmly, unfazed by his loss. But I glimpsed another, someone unseen before, yet deeply bound to him. A sphere of translucent light emerged from his brow and drifted into the man's hand. The man nodded and turned to leave. One heavenly divination remains before the heavenly Tao devours me completely, Chen Tuan asked softly. When will your design come to fruition? Soon. With that, the man ascended and vanished. Chen Tuan gazed skyward, sighed deeply, and closed his eye once more, surrendering to silent rest.